Since 1949, US-Chinese relations have evolved from tense standoffs to a complex mix of intensifying diplomacy, growing international rivalry, and increasingly intertwined economies. A series of events since then need to be explained in order to have a proper context about the relationship. So, 1950. The United States and the United Nations defended South Korea from North Korea, while China defended the North. Many died, forcing them to sign an armistice agreement in 1953. Additionally, in that year, the United States lifted the Navy blockade they had in Taiwan that allowed China to deploy troops on some islands. 5 years later, in 1955, the United States threatens China with a nuclear attack during the Taiwan crisis. However, this did not happen because China agreed to negotiate, claiming a limited victory. 1959. Thousands died in Taiwan after an uprising. In that moment, the United States and the United Nations condemned Beijing for human rights abuse. 1964 was an interesting year because of the entrance from China to the nuclear club that made the atmosphere tenser with the United States. 8 years later, in 1972, Richard Nixon went to China where he signed the Shanghai Communique, which allowed the discussion of difficult issues and normalized the relation between both parties after the Taiwan situation. In 1989, thousands of Chinese students were demanding reforms to end corruption. The government sent troops to clear the area, leaving hundreds dead. As an answer, the United States suspended its military sales to Beijing and froze its relations. In the year 2000, both countries normalized their trade relations. Bill Clinton signed a Relations Act between both countries, granting permanent normal trade and allowing China to join the WTO. In 2006, China surpassed Mexico as the US second biggest trade partner, after Canada. 2 years later, China becomes the largest US foreign creditor. China surpassed Japan as the largest holder of the US debt, which was $600 billion. And worldwide financial crisis raises concerns about economic imbalances among them. In the year 2010, China becomes world's second largest economy. China also surpassed Japan as the world's second largest economy and established itself on the track to overtake the US as the number one by 2027. In the year 2015, the South China Sea dispute began. China's controversial land reclamation efforts over disputed territory affect the relations between the US because the latter opposes to any further militarization on that specific geographic position. US intelligence says that naval surveillance provided evidence that China is placing military equipment on a series of artificial islands, although Beijing stated that those constructions are mainly for civilian purposes. Over the past several years, confrontations between countries in the region of South China Sea have risen dramatically, while US and China's differences over freedom of navigation and overflight in those waters threaten to spill over into conflict. US is viewed in the Southeast Asian states as a guarantee in two ways. Geographical distance mutes its domination, and its non-imperial history suggests the goodwill of its power. Nevertheless, Southeast Asian states have constantly sought to diversify their economic and strategic dependencies by seeking closer ties with China, Japan, and India. Since 1990, all the Southeast Asian states have connected into the opportunities and risks offered by China's rapid growth. China's industrial development has reshaped the regional political economy, reorientating almost all the Southeast Asian economies towards a regional production network centered on a final assembly and overseas export from China. Given that China overtook Japan as the world's second largest economy in 2010 and surpassed the United States as the largest trading nation in the world in 2013, Southeast Asia's intensifying economic interdependence with China is an undeniable fact. For the developing Southeast Asian states, this constantly growing power of China brings them uncertainty. Through this uncertainty, these relatively small and diverse states manifest their deep collective sense of vulnerability toward a bigger actor. Uncertainty and fear about China's growth is focused upon the imperative to estimate Beijing's strategic intentions towards the region and the world, in the short term as well as in the long run. At the same time, Southeast Asian states are extremely sensitive towards the crucial role of the United States in their regional security. There are signs among the leading contenders for the US presidency that strategic engagement in Asia may not be a high priority, being a major mistake on America's part. Because the potential threat that China means for the Southeast Asia, they demand far greater US attention and presents enormous opportunities and challenges for strengthening American engagement in the wider Indo-Pacific. Here we can observe one of the theories in which the realists believe, which is backpassing, due to the situation where countries claim the presence of US to make mediation, because China's power is increasing in an unmeasured way. Within this specific South China Sea dispute, we can observe there is a polarity system. This theory is introduced by the neo-realist. The structural realism says that sometimes it's good to have two big actors in the international scenario that can control each other, which is the case we're currently studying with the US and China. They are the two big actors, the core countries, while the Southeast Asian states are the periphery, those who depend on the two big ones. This system says that if one of the two countries is getting so powerful to the extent that it represents a threat for the system, the other big country restrains it and stops them from getting even more powerful. In this specific case, the Southeast Asian states want the US to mediate for them and try to stop China from becoming stronger, but at the same time, they aim for an appropriate balance because all of them have extensive trade and diplomatic relations with China. It is clearly seen the American interest to sustain the strategic engagement within the region, while China is growing in military, economic, and diplomatic affairs. This condition can be related with the concept of security dilemma, because all states begin competing over security measures, yet in the end no state feels more secure. The United States and China recognize that their economies are closely interconnected, each country being heavily involved in the economic prosperity of the other. As China becomes stronger and powerful, it represents a threat for the United States. All the relation could end up in a potential confrontation among powers. Within this specific dispute, Southeast Asia is at the center of this strategic picture and is increasingly becoming a locus for strategic competition between the United States and China. Here we can identify a potential confrontation between the two powerful countries in order to see who is the hegemonical power.